Charles Krauthammer comes here in just a minute to join us, but first, our country's most powerful institutions have hated the rest of the country for a long time. When the people who run tech companies or Hollywood studios look out the window of their G5s as they commute from Santa Monica to Teterboro, they see a population that's fat and bigoted and dumb. They feel pure contempt for the people below them. Well, now at long last, Middle America is returning those feelings. A new poll by Pew finds that Republican-leaning voters have come to distrust the higher education establishment a lot. 58% of them believe colleges and universities have a negative overall effect on the country. Just 36% think they have a positive effect. That's a swing of about 20 points from just 2 years ago. Okay, you say, that's just because stupid, uneducated conservatives naturally hate schools they could never get into, right? Wrong. Actually, Republicans with college degrees are even more hostile to college than those without them because they know how bad it is. But if colleges have lost the confidence of non-liberals, consider the media. 85% of Republican voters say the national news media are hurting the country. Once again, a substantial swing from just a few years ago. Republicans aren't that impressed by labor unions either, or banks, remarkably. The only institutions that are still viewed positively by both sides of the spectrum are churches and religious groups, and yet those institutions are the ones that are losing power in America. Now, these sentiments are not pointless trivia. These are not numbers that mean nothing. A country can't actually thrive without strong, respected institutions. It's a big deal when the country's elites, whether in media or business or education, reject their own people. But it's an even bigger deal when the people reject them. Well, today, the parents of 11-month-old Charlie Gard stormed out of a British courtroom where they were battling a British judge over their son's treatment. Gard's parents have 2 days to prove to Judge Nicholas Francis that their son, who suffers from a rare genetic disorder, would benefit from experimental treatment here in the United States. The judge previously ruled that additional treatment would be futile after doctors said that the boy could not be helped. The question many have raised, why can't the parents just bring their child to the United States for treatment? Part of the reason may be this: an obscure provision in the UN's Convention on the Rights of the Child inhibits parents' ability to make medical decisions for their children. Now, the U.S. is the only country that has not ratified its membership in the convention. Charles Krauthammer is a physician, a best-selling author who spent a lot of time thinking about medical ethics, and he joins us tonight. So we've talked about this a couple of times, and you've made the point that these are very complex matters, and it's best to, give people space on these. But I had no idea there was an international convention that might be affecting the ability of the parents to decide for their son.
And the fact that it's getting in the way of their being able to act as they wish is a testimony to the wisdom of our not signing it.
Yes.
These are ridiculous international agreements, generally adhered to or at least signed by countries without the rule of law, which basically allows some judge in some country to haul us into the International Court of Justice over this issue or that. We have a Constitution that has maintained and supported and preserved the rights of our citizens, including our children, rather well for a quarter of a millennium. We don't need to sign this stuff. But to me, it just shows you how these debates get so infected by rights talk. I mean, the issue here is not the poor baby Charlie's rights. This is a question of his suffering, the future, his prospects. Rights are irrelevant here. The only question that we should be debating is what's best for the child. And since the child can't speak for himself, who speaks on behalf of the child? That's the ultimate question. Right. And it seems that to me, even though I think that the parents are wrong in this, we talked about this last week, I don't think there's any hope for the child in coming here. I think it would prolong the suffering. Even the doctor who does this treatment for other kinds of these diseases, but never with Charlie's, has said there's only like a 10% chance of any improvement, and even any improvement is going to leave him in a terminal state.
I just find it a little remarkable that an international treaty through the United Nations could impinge on one of the most basic and sacred relationships of all between parent and child. Since when did international bureaucrats decide they have the right to make decisions for your child whom they've never met?
Since forever. That's all they do. They go to five-star hotels. They draw up these agreements, these social agreements, these bills of rights, which are never adhered to. It starts way back after the Second World War with the international conventions for, economic and social rights.
Right.
In the West, we understand what rights are. That's your protection against government intrusion. That's basically a right. It's a right against the government. But it's been expanded, particularly by socialist and communist countries that have none of that protection against government intrusion, to say, well, yes, of course, but we give people economic rights, the right to work, the right to food, etc., social rights, which is a way of saying, we're going to oppress our people, they're going to have no rights, but we're going to feed them, and we'll call that a right. This is, and you end up in these ridiculous discussions and international conventions. I'll give you one example, the law of the sea. This is sort of an invention of rights, so that a country that hasn't ever invented a pencil has a right, quote unquote, to manganese modules at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean that they never would have heard of and still have no use for. Whereas we're mining them with our technology and our sweat and effort. That's what was wrong with the law of the sea.
But I mean, this is what it looks like to have the village raise the child. Yes. When someone you've never met who doesn't know your child gets to make life or death decisions about the child.
Right. I mean, it should be the parents above all, which is why in this case I would allow them to take the child, even though if it were mine I wouldn't. Or secondarily, if it can't be the parents, or if the parents are malevolent or not present, well, then the courts of your own system, your own society. But to rely on some convention nobody's ever heard of, drawn up by bureaucrats who live on a different planet, is absurd. And I think that's an absurdity introduced here. The British are serious about how to deal with this. But this, I think, is the one sign of unseriousness.
Yeah, I've got a key decision to make about my children. Why don't I let bureaucrats in Burma and Zimbabwe weigh in?
Right.
Charles, thank you.